October 28, 1945. 1400 hours. Camp Aliceville, Alabama. 37 boys knelt in the Alabama dust, arranged in 3 precise rows. The autumn sun beat down on their shaved heads. Their hands rested on their thighs, palms up, fingers spread. The position they had been taught meant surrender. Guard towers loomed at each corner of the compound. American soldiers stood at attention, rifles held across their chests. The formation was unmistakable. Every boy recognized it. They had seen it before in grainy photographs shown during their training. This was an execution formation. Lucas Dietrich Weber, 15 years old, occupied the center position of the front row. His uniform hung loose on his frame. He had lost 20 pounds since capture. The fabric, once Feldgrau field gray, had faded to the color of old dishwater. To his left, Jakob Heinrich Müller trembled. 14 years old, the youngest of them all.
Jacob's shoulders shook with silent sobs he was trying desperately to suppress.
Lucas shifted his weight slightly, just enough to let his knee touch Jacob's. A small contact. A message. "You are not alone. We die together." The camp loudspeakers crackled to life. The boys flinched as one organism. A voice spoke in English, calm, authoritative, impossible to understand. Lucas closed his eyes, thought of Hamburg, of his mother's kitchen on a Sunday morning, before the war, the smell of fresh bread. His little sister Sophie, 7 years old, laughing as she tried to steal jam from the counter. He wondered if they were still alive. He wondered if Georg's mother had survived, if she would ever know that her son's last words were, "Tell my mother I was brave." The English voice stopped. Silence settled over the compound like snowfall. This was it. Instead, footsteps. A man appeared in Lucas's peripheral vision. American uniform, captain's insignia.
Tall, lean, maybe 35 years old. He walked the length of the front row, examining each face. When he reached Lucas, he stopped. Lucas forced himself to look up. If he was going to die, he would die with dignity. The captain's face was weathered, lined around the eyes and mouth, a face that had seen combat. But his expression was not cruel, not cold. The captain looked sad. Another man joined him, older, heavier, with sergeant stripes. The sergeant carried a clipboard. They conferred in low voices. Time stretched. The sun climbed higher. Finally, the captain made a sharp gesture. Decision made. The sergeant nodded, turned toward the guard towers, raised one hand. This is it, Lucas thought. The sergeant's hand came down, but no shots came. Instead, the camp gates swung open. 6 months earlier, April 18th, 1945, outside Nuremberg. The bombardment had lasted 3 days without pause. American artillery pounded German positions with methodical precision. Lucas huddled in a trench with 36 other boys and 4 adult soldiers. The 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, Hitler Youth, child soldiers conscripted in the regime's final desperate months. He was 14 years old. He had been a soldier for 6 weeks. Georg Hartmann pressed against Lucas's right side. Georg was 15. They had been friends since childhood. Same street in Hamburg, same school, same everything. "They will come soon," Georg whispered. Lucas nodded. He could hear the American tanks, the grinding of treads, getting closer. Their position was indefensible. The adult soldiers had explained the situation with brutal clarity. They would fight until the Americans overran them, then they would die. The regime called it heroic sacrifice. Lucas called it murder. "I am scared," Georg said. "Me too. If I die, tell my mother I was brave. Tell her I did my duty. She needs to believe that." Lucas grabbed Georg's hand, squeezed hard. "You will tell her yourself. We will both survive." Georg smiled, a sad smile. "You were always a terrible liar, Lucas." The artillery barrage stopped. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. Then the engines grew louder. The first American tank crested the ridge 300 yards away. Sherman tanks, painted olive drab, white stars bright on their hulls. Behind them came infantry, dozens of men, hundreds. One of the adult soldiers, Unteroffizier Koch, 19 years old, stood up in the trench, raised his rifle. "For the fatherland!" he screamed. The American tanks did not slow down. Koch kept firing, until a burst of machine gun fire cut him in half. The other adult soldiers opened fire. The boys followed, because that was what they had been trained to do. Lucas raised his rifle, sighted down the barrel at American soldiers who were close enough now to see their faces. Young faces, scared faces. He could not pull the trigger. Georg fired 3 shots, worked the bolt, fired again. The Americans returned fire. One of the boys, Heinrich, 13 years old, from Munich, fell backward with a red flower blooming on his chest. "Surrender!" Lucas shouted. "No!" Georg grabbed Lucas's shoulder. "We fight! We—" The explosion came without warning. A mortar shell. Direct hit on their section of trench. The world turned white, then red, then black. When Lucas opened his eyes, he was lying on his back. His ears rang. Smoke and dust choked the air. Something warm and wet covered his face. Blood. Pain lanced through his left arm. Shrapnel wound, deep, bleeding badly. "Georg?" His voice sounded distant. "Georg!" Georg lay 3 feet away. His eyes were open, staring at the sky, not blinking. Lucas crawled to him, pressed his hand against the wound that should not be there. No, 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 no. Georg's eyes found Lucas's face, focused, a little. Lucas. His voice was barely a whisper. Blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. "Tell my mother." "I will. I promise. But you will tell her. You will tell her I was brave." "You are brave. You are—" "Tell her." Georg exhaled, a long, rattling breath. He did not inhale again. Lucas knelt in the trench, holding his dead best friend, while American soldiers secured the position. While the other boys threw down their weapons and raised their hands. He knelt there until an American medic gently pulled him away, bandaged his arm, led him to a truck where the other survivors waited. As they drove away, Lucas looked back at the trench, at Georg's body, already being covered with a tarp. "I promise," Lucas whispered. "I will tell her." But he had no idea if Georg's mother was still alive. September 1945. Atlantic Ocean. Transport ship USS General M.B. Stewart. The voyage took 8 days. Lucas spent most of it below deck in a converted cargo hold. 300 German POWs crammed into a space designed for half that number. The air reeked of unwashed bodies, vomit, and fear. He learned English from an American guard named Martinez, who spoke slowly, used simple words, pointed at objects and named them. Bread, water, blanket, sleep. Lucas repeated the words, memorized them. Language was survival. On the 3rd day, Martinez brought newspapers, old ones from May. The headlines showed photographs Lucas wished he could unsee. Concentration camps, liberated by Allied forces, Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, Buchenwald, piles of corpses, living skeletons, children with numbers tattooed on their arms. The other German prisoners turned away, insisted the photographs were Allied propaganda. Lucas looked, forced himself to look at every image, every face, because Georg had died believing they were fighting for something noble, for the fatherland, for honor and duty, and all the lies they had been fed since childhood. Georg had died for this, for the people who built those camps. The guilt was a physical weight in Lucas's chest. One of the younger boys, Ernst Wolfgang Becker, 17, still convinced the Reich would rise again, leaned close to Lucas. "Do not trust them," Ernst whispered. "They will execute us as soon as we reach land." "Shut up, Ernst." But his words planted seeds of fear that grew in the darkness below deck. What if execution waited at the end of this voyage? The ship sailed on through dark water, carrying its cargo of broken boys toward an uncertain shore. October 28, 1945. Camp Aliceville, Alabama. 0900 hours. The trucks arrived at dawn. 37 boys climbed down onto Alabama soil for the first time. They stood in a ragged formation, blinking in bright southern sunlight. The camp was enormous. Rows of identical barracks stretched into the distance. Barbed wire fencing, guard towers, searchlights. It looked exactly like the camps in the photographs, the ones from May. Jacob grabbed Lucas's sleeve. "This is it. This is where they—" "Stop. We do not know that." But Lucas's own heart hammered against his ribs. Inside the processing building, they were photographed, fingerprinted, given prisoner numbers. A medical officer examined each boy. An older American doctor checked Lucas's heart rate, examined the shrapnel scar on his left arm. The doctor made notes, frowned. Malnutrition, probable anemia. Looks like he lost 25, maybe 30 pounds. Get him on a high-calorie diet immediately. Lucas understood the tone, clinical, concerned, not cruel, not what he expected. The doctor met Lucas's eyes, smiled, a sad smile. "You are very young, too young for this. I am sorry." By noon, processing was complete. The 37 boys stood in formation outside the main building. An American officer approached, captain's insignia, tall, lean, weathered face. Behind him walked a sergeant with kind eyes and a nun who carried a notebook. The captain stood before them. When his eyes met Lucas's, something flickered there, recognition almost. Then the captain began to speak. The nun translated into German. "My name is Captain Nathaniel Aldridge. I am the commanding officer of this facility. You are now prisoners of war under the protection of the United States Army and the Geneva Convention." Pause for translation. "You will not be harmed. You will not be tortured. You will not be executed. You will receive adequate food, clean water, medical care, and shelter. Those are not privileges. Those are rights guaranteed by international law." Pause. "The war is over. Your government has surrendered. Your duty as soldiers has ended. Your duty now is to remain healthy and safe until arrangements can be made for your repatriation to Germany." The nun finished translating. Silence fell. None of the boys moved. They had learned not to trust promises from men in authority. Captain Aldridge seemed to sense their skepticism. "Sister Catherine, ask them if they have questions." Sister Catherine Finnegan spoke in flawless German. "The captain wishes to know if you have any questions about your treatment here." More silence. Then, slowly, Lucas raised his hand. Every eye turned toward him. Ernst shot him a warning look, but Lucas kept his hand raised. Captain Aldridge acknowledged him with a nod. "Yes?" Lucas's mouth was dry, his heart pounded, but the question had been building inside him for weeks. "Sir," Lucas said in careful, halting English, "we are allowed to smile here?" Sister Catherine translated, though the captain seemed to have understood. "Or this is forbidden? If we feel happy about something, we are permitted to show this? Or will we be punished?" The question hung in the humid Alabama air. The American soldiers went very quiet, processing what the question revealed, that these boys had been so thoroughly conditioned that they did not know if displaying happiness was safe. Captain Aldridge's face showed controlled anger, not at the boys, at the system that had shaped them to ask such questions. He stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, almost paternal. Sister Catherine translated, though Aldridge looked directly at Lucas. "Son, you are not only allowed to smile, you are encouraged to smile. You are children. Children should be happy when circumstances permit happiness." Pause. "If something makes you happy or amuses you or brings you joy, you should feel free to express that. No one here will punish you for smiling or laughing or showing emotion." Pause. "That is not how we treat prisoners, and it is especially not how we treat children." Captain Aldridge reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a photograph, held it so Lucas could see. A family portrait, the captain in civilian clothes, a woman and a boy, a teenager with dark hair and a wide smile. "This is my son, Daniel. He is 15 years old, the same age as you." The captain's voice was steady, but Lucas heard the emotion beneath it. "When I look at you boys, I see Daniel. I see his friends from school. I see children who should be learning algebra and playing baseball." He put the photograph away. "Not this. Never this. The captain straightened, addressed all 37 boys. You are safe here. That is a promise. Not from Captain Aldridge, the officer, but from Nathaniel Aldridge, the father. The man who understands that every one of you is somebody's son, somebody's hope for the future. The boys followed him across the compound, still silent, still wary. But Lucas noticed something. The American soldiers they passed did not glare, did not spit. They simply watched. Some with curiosity, some with pity. No one with hatred. The barracks was separate from the main prisoner population. Smaller, cleaner, beds with actual mattresses, blankets, pillows. "This is your home for now," Captain Aldridge said through Sister Catherine. "Sergeant Augustus Pemberton will be your primary supervisor." The sergeant stepped forward. Maybe 40. His face was deeply lined. He had kind eyes. "Evening, boys," Pemberton said in a slow Georgia drawl. Sister Catherine translated. "I got 3 sons of my own back home, 14, 16, 18 years old, so I know how boys your age think." He smiled. "You are going to test boundaries. You are going to make mistakes. That is fine. That is what boys do. Just remember, I am here to help you, not hurt you. We clear on that?" Nods, hesitant, uncertain. "Good. Now, you have got 30 minutes to settle in. Then we head to the mess hall for lunch. I bet you boys are hungry." As if on cue, Lucas's stomach growled, audibly. Several boys laughed, then immediately stopped, looking frightened, waiting for punishment. No punishment came. Sergeant Pemberton just grinned. "That is what I thought. 30 minutes. The Americans left. The door closed.
37 boys stood in the barracks, looking at actual beds, at clean blankets. "It is a trick," Ernst said immediately. "Then what?" Karl Friedrich Schmidt interrupted. "Then they waste all these resources just to kill us? That makes no sense." "Maybe they do not." Lucas sat on one of the beds. The mattress was soft, real. Maybe the captain was telling the truth. Jakob sat beside Lucas, whispered, "Do you really think we are safe?" Lucas thought about Captain Aldridge's face when he showed the photograph of his son, the genuine emotion there. He thought about the question he had asked, "Are we allowed to smile here?" And the answer, "You are encouraged to smile." "I do not know," Lucas admitted, "but I think, maybe, we might be." It was the first time in 6 months he had allowed himself even that small possibility. Hope, dangerous, fragile, terrifying, but there. The mess hall stood at the center of the compound. As the 37 boys approached, Lucas noticed something that made his steps falter. A smell. Not the watery cabbage soup of the transport ship, not the moldy bread. Real food, meat cooking, fat sizzling, something rich and savory that made his empty stomach clench. They had not smelled real meat in over a year. Sergeant Pemberton held the door open. "Come on in, boys." The mess hall was clean, long tables. American soldiers sat at some tables, eating and talking quietly. They glanced up as the German boys entered, but did not stop eating. One table had been set aside, 37 places, metal trays, utensils, cups. The boys sat, slowly, uncertainly, waiting for the other shoe to drop. A young black corporal with a kind face and muscular forearms worked behind a serving line. He wore a cook's apron over his uniform. 10 minutes later, he emerged carrying a large tray. He walked to the German table, set the tray down. On it, thick slices of roast beef, still steaming, juices pooling on the metal. The smell was overwhelming. The corporal went back, returned with mashed potatoes, real butter melting in yellow pools across the surface. Again. Green beans, cooked with bacon. Again. Fresh bread, warm, golden brown crust. Again. Apple pie, cinnamon and sugar crystals visible on top. The boys stared. No one moved. No one reached for food. The corporal, his name tape said Townsend, stood at the head of the table. "My grandmother always told me, you feed people first, you ask questions later."
Sister Catherine translated. "This food is from my kitchen. I cooked it myself. Roast beef the way my grandmother taught me." He picked up a serving spoon, put roast beef on the first tray, then potatoes, beans, bread, a slice of pie. He set it in front of Lucas. "Eat. There is plenty more. You do not have to hurry. There is enough for everyone." Lucas looked down at the tray, at more food than he had seen in 6 months. His hands shook as he picked up the fork. "It is poisoned," Ernst whispered. "If they wanted us dead," Karl interrupted, "they would have shot us on the beach." Lucas cut a piece of beef, brought it to his mouth. The taste hit him like a physical blow, rich, savory, seasoned with salt and pepper and herbs he could not name. Fat rendered down until it melted on his tongue. Real food. His eyes filled with tears. He could not stop them, could not control the sudden, overwhelming emotion that crashed through the walls he had built around himself. 6 months of hunger, 6 months of fear, and here it was, on a tray in an American prison camp, given freely by an enemy soldier who quoted his grandmother's wisdom. Lucas tried to chew, to swallow, but his throat had closed up. Tears ran down his face into the food on his tray. He could not stop eating and could not stop crying. Jacob saw Lucas crying, began crying himself. Karl was next, then another boy, then another. Within minutes, all 37 were eating and crying, sobbing openly while they consumed roast beef and mashed potatoes, tears falling into apple pie. The American soldiers in the mess hall went quiet, watched in silence. Some looked away, some wiped their own eyes. Corporal Townsend stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, face carved from stone. But his jaw was tight, his eyes were wet. Captain Aldridge entered the mess hall, took in the scene, the crying boys, the half-empty trays. He walked to where Sergeant Pemberton stood watching. "Jesus Christ," Aldridge said quietly. "Yes, sir." "How long since they have eaten like this?" "Based on the medical reports, 6 months minimum, probably longer." Aldridge watched Lucas cry into his roast beef, saw his son Daniel eating Sunday dinner in Fort Worth, taking food for granted. And here was a boy Daniel's age, weeping because someone had given him meat and potatoes. "I am going to call Eleanor tonight. I am going to tell her to hug Daniel for me." Ernst was the last to break. He held out for 5 minutes, maintaining his rigid skepticism, but hunger was stronger than pride. His face crumpled. He bent over his tray, shoulders heaving with silent sobs. Dr. Samuel Rothstein entered the mess hall. He was an older man, perhaps 55, with grey hair and glasses. He wore a Star of David on a chain around his neck. He walked to the German table, pulled up a chair, sat beside Ernst. Ernst looked up, saw the Star of David, understood immediately. "You are Jewish," Ernst said in German, barely a whisper. "I am," Rothstein replied in perfect German. "Then you should hate us. You should want us to starve." Rothstein was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "I lost my parents in Theresienstadt, my sister in Auschwitz, my brother in Dachau. I have every reason to hate. But when I look at you, I do not see the men who killed my family. I see children. And I am a doctor. Doctors heal, that is all." Ernst stared at him. "Why?" "Because you are somebody's child, and that still matters." Something broke in Ernst's face, the rigid ideology, the desperate belief, the armor he had built to survive. He put his face in his hands and wept. Rothstein placed a hand on his shoulder, left it there while Ernst cried, said nothing, just sat with him in his grief. Across the table, Lucas watched, trying to understand, trying to reconcile the world he had been taught to believe in with this reality. A Jewish doctor comforting a German boy who had believed the lies. An American soldier feeding enemy children with his grandmother's recipes. A captain who showed photographs of his own son. Perhaps the lies had been the propaganda. And this mercy, this kindness, perhaps this was truth. The meal ended slowly. Some boys got sick from eating too much too fast. They ran outside and vomited and came back embarrassed. Pemberton just handed them water, said it was normal, No punishment, no mockery, just understanding. That night, in the barracks, the boys lay in their beds in darkness, full stomachs for the first time in months. Lucas stared at the ceiling. Sleep would not come. Around him he heard others breathing, some sleeping, some awake. Then, from Jacob's bed, "Lucas?" "Yes?" "Do you think Georg's mother is still alive?" The question hit like shrapnel. "I do not know." "If she is alive, will you tell her, like you promised?" "Yes." "What will you say?" "I will tell her he was brave, that he did his duty as he understood it, that he thought of her at the end." "Will you tell her the truth?" "What is the truth, Jacob?" "That we were children, that we should have been in school, not trenches." Lucas closed his eyes. "No, I will not tell her that. She does not need to carry that weight." Silence. Then Karl's voice. "Do you think we can really smile here?" "I do not think he was lying." "How do you know?" "Because if he wanted to break us, there are easier ways, torture, starvation. But instead, he feeds us his own food. He shows us his son's photograph." "That could still be manipulation," Ernst said. His voice was different now, quieter, less certain. "Then what is their game?" Lucas interrupted. "Ernst, we have been here for 12 hours. In that time, they have given us clean clothes, soft beds, and the best meal we have eaten in a year. They have a Jewish doctor who lost his whole family to camps like the ones we supported, and he sat with you while you cried. So tell me, what is the trap?" Ernst had no answer. Maybe there is no trap. Maybe they mean what they say. Maybe we are actually safe. The possibility hung in the darkness like a fragile thing. But there, the nightmare came at 0300 hours. Lucas jerked awake, heart hammering, Georg's face vivid in his mind, Georg's eyes going empty, blood on his hands. He sat up, breathing hard. Camp Aliceville, Alabama, safe. Not the trench, safe. But his hands still shook. He got out of bed, walked to the door, needed air. Outside, the compound was quiet. Searchlights swept across the grounds. A guard walked past, saw Lucas, nodded but did not challenge him. Lucas sat on the barrack steps, put his head in his hands. "Cannot sleep?" He looked up. Sergeant Pemberton stood a few feet away, holding 2 cups. "Hot chocolate. My boys love it. Figured you might need something warm." Lucas took the cup. The heat felt good against his palms. Pemberton sat beside him, said nothing, just sat there. Finally, Lucas spoke. "My friend died. In the battle when we were captured. His name was Georg. He asked me to tell his mother he was brave." "Did you promise?" "Yes." "That is a heavy promise for a boy your age."
"I do not know if she is alive."
Pemberton nodded slowly. "I have 3 sons, Matthew, Luke, and John. Matthew is 18, enlisted last year, shipped to the Pacific." He paused. "Every night I pray he does not die. But if he does, I pray someone like you is there. Someone who will promise to tell me he was brave." Lucas looked at him. "You lost someone." "My brother. Italy, 1944. A German sniper got him." Pemberton's voice was steady. "I could hate all Germans for that. Could see you boys as the enemy. But you do not." "No, because Matthew's age, Luke's age, John's age, they are your age. And I look at you boys, and I see them. I see children who got pulled into something too big to understand." He finished his chocolate. "The adults who started this war, who conscripted children, them I hate. But you are a victim, same as my brother. Different uniform, same tragedy." Lucas felt tears coming again. "I do not feel like a victim. I feel like I should have done more." Said no, refused. "You were 14. Old enough to know right from wrong." "Were you? Really?" Pemberton turned to face him. "Did anyone teach you what was right? Or did they teach you lies from the moment you could understand words?" Lucas had no answer. "I am not saying you bear no responsibility,
But I am saying you were a child in a system designed to turn children into soldiers. And that system failed you, not the other way around. They sat in silence. Will you help me? Find Georg's mother? Find my own mother and sister? Already working on it. Captain Aldridge contacted the Red Cross this morning. Thank you. It is the right thing to do. Pemberton stood, collected the empty cups. Try to sleep, son. Tomorrow we start educational classes. He walked away. The night air was cool. The stars were bright in a way they never were in Hamburg. The southern sky was vast and clear. Lucas thought about his mother and Sophie, about Georg's mother, about the promise he had made. He thought about Sergeant Pemberton's brother, killed by a German sniper, about Dr. Rothstein's family, murdered in camps, and he thought about Captain Aldridge showing him Daniel's photograph, about Corporal Townsend's grandmother teaching him to feed people first. The world was more complicated than he had been taught, more painful, but also perhaps more hopeful. Perhaps there was room for mercy even after terrible things. Perhaps healing was possible. Lucas went back inside, lay down on his soft bed. This time, sleep came easier. And for the first time since Georg died, he slept without nightmares. November 15th, 1945. 1000 hours. Sister Catherine came to the barracks, carrying a canvas bag. Her face was carefully neutral. The Red Cross has located some of your family members. I have letters. She began calling names. Wilhelm Schneider. A boy stood, took his letter, read. His face went white. He sat down hard. His family, gone. All of them. Hamburg firebombing. Sister Catherine continued. Some letters brought joy. Some brought grief. Lucas Dietrich Weber. Lucas stood on legs that felt like water, walked to Sister Catherine, took the letter. His hands shook. Inside, 2 pieces of paper, both typewritten in German. The first. Weber, Elizabeth, age 38, located in Displaced Persons Camp 7, Hamburg. Status, alive. Health, fair. Weber, Sophie, age 11, located with mother. Status, alive. Health, fair. Lucas read it 3 times, 4 times. Alive. Both alive. Mother and Sophie both alive. The second paper. Weber, Heinrich, age 46, confirmed deceased. Allied bombing raid, Hamburg, April 3rd, 1945. Father, dead. Killed by Allied bombs while Lucas was in training. The emotions hit in waves. Relief, mother alive, Sophie alive. Grief, father dead. Guilt, if Lucas had been there, could he have done something? He sat on his bed, stared at the letters. Jacob sat beside him. Lucas? Lucas handed him the papers. I am sorry about your father. But your mother and sister, I know, I should be grateful. 2 out of 3, better than Wilhelm got. Across the room, Wilhelm still sat holding his letter, staring at nothing, orphaned by fire. I am grateful, but I also feel... The words would not come. He put his face in his hands. Karl appeared on his other side, then Ernst, then others. They sat in a circle around Lucas, saying nothing, just being present. After a while, Captain Aldridge entered the barracks. He crouched in front of Lucas. I heard about your father. I am sorry, son. Lucas looked up. I should have been there. I should have protected him. You were 14 years old, in military training. There was nothing you could have done. I could have refused conscription, and they would have arrested you, shot you for desertion, punished your family. You know that. Lucas did know, but knowing did not help. Aldridge sat on the floor, not above Lucas, beside him, equal level. When I was in the Pacific, on Okinawa, I lost half my unit in one day. Boys I had trained with, men who trusted me to lead them, and they died while I lived. He paused. I carried that guilt for a long time. Still do, some days. I asked myself, what if I had given different orders? Could I have saved them? What did you decide? That guilt is natural. It means we care. But guilt without purpose is just another kind of prison. Aldridge met Lucas's eyes. Your father is gone. You cannot change that. But your mother and sister are alive. They need you to survive, to heal, to come home to them. How can I go home like this? Broken. You are not broken. You are hurt. There is a difference. Broken cannot be fixed. Hurt can heal. Aldridge stood, helped Lucas to his feet. You asked if you are allowed to smile here. The answer is yes. But today, you are also allowed to grieve. And tomorrow, you are allowed to start healing. One day at a time. He put a hand on Lucas's shoulder. Your mother is waiting for you. That is a gift. Honor it by becoming someone she can be proud of. Not a soldier, not a prisoner, just her son. Aldridge left. Outside, November rain began to fall. Soft Alabama rain. It pattered against the barracks roof, a gentle rhythm. Lucas held the letters. Mother alive, Sophie alive, father gone. 2 out of 3. He would take it. He would carry the guilt and the grief. But he would also carry the hope. Because guilt without purpose was just another prison. And Lucas had already spent enough time in prisons. It was time to start finding a way out. November 20th, 1945, 1400 hours. Camp Aliceville Therapy Garden. Dr. Rothstein had suggested gardening as therapy. Something about working with soil and growing things. Lucas did not understand the theory. But he understood that digging in dirt was better than sitting in the barracks, thinking about everything he had lost. So he dug. The therapy garden occupied 2 acres on the southern edge of the compound. Vegetables mostly. The work was simple. Pull weeds, turn earth, water when the plants looked thirsty. Lucas worked alongside Carl and Jacob. They moved in silence, finding rhythm in the repetitive motions. The Alabama sun was warm on Lucas's back. The air smelled of turned earth and growing things. This is peaceful, Jacob said after an hour. Carl nodded. My grandfather had a garden, before the war. What happened to him? Lucas asked. Died in 1943. Heart attack during an air raid. Carl pulled another weed. At least he did not see what came after. They worked in silence again. Then Jacob stopped, went very still. Look! At the edge of the garden, where cultivated rows met wild grass, a rabbit sat in the late afternoon sun, small, brown and white. A cottontail. It sat on its haunches, washing its face with its paws, completely unconcerned with the 3 boys 20 feet away. The rabbit paused, looked directly at them. Its nose twitched. It did not run. It is not afraid of us, Carl whispered. Something about those words hit Lucas in the chest. The rabbit was not afraid of them. For 6 months, everything had been afraid of them. Civilians fleeing, other soldiers giving them wide berth, American soldiers looking at them with wariness. Everything that lived had learned to fear German soldiers. But this rabbit, sitting in Alabama sunshine, washing its face, it felt no fear. It saw 3 boys in a garden. Nothing more, nothing less. Carl smiled. Not a big smile, just a small movement of facial muscles that looked unpracticed. Then Jacob smiled too. Lucas felt something shift inside himself. A crack in the wall of numbness he had built. Something warm and fragile pushing through. His face moved. Muscles he had not used in months, remembering their purpose. He was smiling. Genuinely smiling. For the first time since Georg died. The rabbit finished washing, hopped 2 feet closer, sat again, regarded them with dark, curious eyes. Why is it not afraid? Jacob asked. Maybe, Lucas said slowly, it sees what we really are, not soldiers, just boys. Sergeant Pemberton had been supervising the garden work. Now he approached quietly. He saw the 3 boys, saw their faces, saw the smiles. His own face changed, something between joy and grief. Beautiful rabbit, Pemberton said in simple English. Nice to see animals happy and safe. Carl responded in broken English.
We are happy too. The rabbit is good, makes us feel good. He paused. The old fear crept back. Is this still permitted? To feel happy? Pemberton's eyes went wet, but his voice stayed steady. Yes, son. Being happy is always permitted, especially about rabbits.
The rabbit sat with them for another 5 minutes. Then it hopped away into the tall grass.
The three boys stood in silence, watching where it had gone. I want to see it again, Lucas said. We could bring vegetables, Jacob suggested, from the kitchen, to feed it. Would they let us? Carl asked. Lucas thought about Corporal Townsend making them roast beef, about Pemberton sitting with him at 0300 hours, about Captain Aldridge showing him Daniel's photograph. Yes, Lucas said, I think they would. That evening Lucas approached Sergeant Pemberton in the barracks. Sir, the rabbit in the garden. If we see it regularly, may we give it a name? Pemberton looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. Of course you can, son. All good rabbits deserve names. Lucas returned to where Carl and Jacob waited. We can name it. What should we call it? Jacob asked. They debated, thought about German names, American names, something that would mean something.
Finally, Lucas said, Hope.
Carl nodded slowly. Yes, hope. Jacob repeated it in English. Hope. It was the first decision they had made for themselves in 8 months, not following orders, not obeying commands, just choosing something because they wanted to. A name for a rabbit. Small, insignificant, everything. November 21st through December 23rd, 1945. The days developed rhythm, mornings, educational classes. Sister Catherine taught German literature. American sergeants taught mathematics and English conversation. The boys attended eagerly. Lucas excelled in English. Every evening, Captain Aldridge spent an hour with him, drilling vocabulary and grammar. You have a gift for languages, Aldridge said one evening. What do you want to do after the war? I do not know. Before conscription, I wanted to be a teacher, like my father was. Was? He taught history at gymnasium in Hamburg. Before the regime changed what could be taught. Aldridge nodded.
You would make a good teacher. You have patience, curiosity, kindness.
I do not feel kind. I feel guilty. Guilt means you have a conscience. That is the first requirement for being a good teacher. Afternoons, work assignments, the garden mostly, light duties. Hope the rabbit came every day, sometimes twice. The boys brought carrots and lettuce from the kitchen stores. Hope would sit in their laps while they weeded, accepting vegetables from their hands with complete trust. Carl drew constantly, sketches of Hope, of the garden, of the other boys. An American guard had given him real drawing paper and pencils. Jacob learned guitar. One of the guards played music and offered lessons. Jacob showed natural aptitude. He learned simple songs quickly, progressed to complex pieces. Ernst had changed. The rigid ideology had cracked completely after Dr. Rothstein's kindness. Now, he helped the younger boys with their lessons, became something like a protective older brother.
The transformation was visible.
37 boys who had arrived broken were slowly becoming children again. Evenings, recreation time, baseball, card games. Jacob played guitar while others sang. Laughter became common, then normal, then expected. They were learning to be boys again. December 24th, 1945, Christmas Eve. The barracks had been transformed. Carl had drawn decorations, snowflakes and stars and evergreen branches, on pieces of paper. The boys had strung them across the rafters. Someone had fashioned a small tree from pine branches. The American staff had provided a real Christmas dinner: turkey, cranberry sauce, stuffing, sweet potatoes, pies. Before the meal, Captain Aldridge asked if anyone wanted to speak. Lucas stood. He had been practicing for weeks. 37 German boys sat watching. American soldiers and staff lined the walls. Sister Catherine stood ready to translate, but Aldridge had asked Lucas to try in English first. Lucas's hands shook.
But he had something to say, and it needed to be said in English, in the language of the people who had shown him mercy. He began.
Captain Aldridge, Sergeant Pemberton, Corporal Townsend, Dr. Rothstein, Sister Catherine.
All American soldiers here. Deep breath. When we arrived at this place, I asked if we were allowed to smile. His English was accented, but clear. I asked this because I had forgotten what smiling felt like, because my best friend Jorg died in my arms, because I thought I deserved to die too, because everything I was taught said enemies do not show mercy. He looked at Captain Aldridge. But you showed me something different. You did not see enemy soldiers. You saw children. Pause. Hope the rabbit taught me first, that something could trust us again, that we could be near a living thing and it would not run away in fear. Several boys nodded. But you taught me every day. Captain, you showed me your son Daniel's photograph. You said I am the same age. That is what I understood. You see me as human, not as enemy, as somebody's son. Lucas's voice cracked. He pushed through. Corporal Townsend, you fed us with your grandmother's recipe. You said feed people first, ask questions later. I cried while eating that first meal, because it was the first time in many months someone treated me with kindness. Townsend stood against the wall. His jaw was tight. Sergeant Pemberton, you sat with me at 3 a.m. You gave me hot chocolate. You told me about your brother who died in Italy. A German soldier killed him. But you do not hate me for wearing the same uniform. You said I am a victim too. Pemberton nodded once. Dr. Rothstein, you lost your family in camps that my government built. You have every reason to hate us. But you sat with Ernst when he cried. You said we are somebody's children. That matters more than hate. Rothstein's eyes were wet behind his glasses. All of you saved my life. Not with bullets, not with force, with turkey and kindness, with seeing us as human when the world said we are enemy. He looked at his fellow prisoners. We cannot change what happened. We cannot bring back the dead. We cannot undo the evil that was done in our names. But we can choose what we do next. He turned back to the Americans. When I go home to my mother and sister, I will tell them there are good Americans, that even in war there is mercy, that Captain Nathaniel Aldridge gave me permission to smile again, to be a child again, to hope again. His voice was steady now. Thank you. Thank you for being a second father when mine was gone. Thank you for showing me that healing is possible, that guilt does not have to be a prison, that even after terrible things, there can be kindness. He sat down. Silence. Then Captain Aldridge stood, walked to Lucas, extended his hand. Lucas stood, shook it. Aldridge pulled him into an embrace. You are going to be okay, son, Aldridge whispered in English. You are going to survive this. You are going to go home and be someone your mother can be proud of. Lucas cried into the captain's shoulder. Around the room, other boys were crying. American soldiers were crying. When they separated, Ernst stood, walked to Lucas. I was wrong, Ernst said in German, about everything, the ideology, the hate, the belief that mercy was weakness. He looked at Dr. Rothstein. I am sorry. I do not expect forgiveness, but I am sorry. Dr. Rothstein crossed the room, stood before Ernst. You were 17 years old, a child taught lies by adults you trusted. The fault is theirs, not yours. He offered his hand. Ernst took it. They stood there, Jewish doctor and former Hitler youth, hands clasped, while Christmas Eve in Alabama witnessed something like redemption. April 10th, 1946, 0800 hours, final morning. The trucks were coming at noon. Repatriation. After 6 months in Camp Aliceville, the boys were going home. Home to a Germany that no longer existed, to cities reduced to rubble, to families torn apart. But home. Lucas packed his few possessions, the letters from his mother, 5 total. Sophie had added drawings to the last 2. The photograph Captain Aldridge had given him. 37 boys with Hope the rabbit, taken in December. Carl's drawing of Hope, carefully folded. That was everything. Captain Aldridge entered the barracks. May I speak with you? Outside? They walked to the garden one final time. The vegetables were growing well. Hope was there. The rabbit hopped over when it saw Lucas.
Lucas knelt, fed Hope lettuce from his palm, stroked the soft fur. "I will miss you, little friend." The rabbit accepted the lettuce. Rabbits lived in the present. No past, no future. Just now. Aldridge handed Lucas an envelope. "My address in Fort Worth. Eleanor's too. And this." He pulled out another photograph.
Daniel, age 15, standing in front of a house, baseball glove in hand. "I want you to write to me. Tell me about your life, about your mother and Sophie." "You want me to write?" "I need to know you are okay, that you survived, that all this meant something." Lucas took the photograph, studied Daniel's face. "I will write, I promise. And Lucas, this is important. What happened here, what we did for you boys, it was not special. It was the bare minimum of human decency." Aldridge's face was serious. "I do not want you to spend your life being grateful for being treated like a human being. That should be normal. The fact that it feels like a gift, that is the tragedy. That is what you should never forget." "I do not understand." "Someday you will. Someday, when you are teaching your own children, you will remember this, and you will make sure they understand. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity. That is not mercy. That is justice." They walked back in silence. At 11:30 hours, the final meal. Turkey again. Same recipe as the first meal. "Cannot let you boys leave without one more proper meal," Townsend said. They ate together, Americans and Germans, at the same tables, talking, laughing. At noon, the trucks arrived. 37 boys lined up, climbed aboard. Captain Aldridge shook each hand. Sergeant Pemberton embraced each boy. Dr. Rothstein blessed them in Hebrew and German. Sister Catherine made the sign of the cross over each bowed head. Corporal Townsend handed out paper sacks. "Sandwiches for the journey, my grandmother's recipe." As the trucks prepared to leave, Lucas looked back at the compound, at the garden where Hope lived, at the mess hall where he had cried over roast beef, at the barracks where he had learned to sleep without nightmares, at the place that had saved his life. The trucks pulled away, through the gates, onto Alabama roads. Lucas watched Camp Aliceville disappear behind them. "We will see them again," Jacob said. "Someday. We will come back and say thank you properly." Carl nodded. "Yes, we will." Lucas held the photograph of Daniel. "Yes," he said, "we will." 1970. Fort Worth, Texas. 25 years later. The airplane descended through Texas sky. Lucas pressed his face to the window, watching the city spread below. Beside him, Carl fidgeted with his tie. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified." "Me too." Behind them, Jacob hummed quietly. They were 40 years old now, middle-aged men with their own stories. Lucas, a teacher in Hamburg, married to Anna, 2 children, Heinrich, named for his father, and Georg, named for his friend. He taught history and literature. Most importantly, he taught them about mercy. Carl had become an artist, internationally recognized. His paintings of Hope the Rabbit hung in museums across Europe. Jacob was a music therapist. He worked with trauma survivors, with refugees. His guitar had saved him. Now he used it to save others. Ernst had become a priest. He spent his life in service, atoning through action. They had stayed in touch. The bond forged in Camp Aliceville had never broken. And they had written to Captain Aldridge, every year. Christmas cards, updates, photographs of their children. He had written back, every time. Last month, a letter had arrived, an invitation. "It has been 25 years. Come to Texas. Let us share a meal. Let me see what you have become." So, here they were. The plane landed. They retrieved luggage, walked through the terminal on shaking legs. In arrivals, a man waited, tall, lean, grey hair now, weathered face. But the eyes were the same. Captain Nathaniel Aldridge, age 59, retired from the army. Beside him stood a woman, Eleanor, salt and pepper hair, kind face, and a man in his 40s, Daniel, the boy from the photograph, grown into a teacher. Lucas stopped, could not move. 25 years collapsed into nothing. Aldridge smiled, opened his arms.
Lucas crossed the distance, embraced the man who had saved his life. They stood there, two men crying in a Texas airport. "You came," Aldridge said. "I promised I would write. I promised I would tell you we were okay. How could I not come?" Carl and Jacob joined them. More embraces, more tears. Eleanor hugged them all. "Nate has talked about you boys for 25 years. You are part of our family." Daniel shook their hands. "Dad showed me the photographs. I grew up hearing about Camp Aliceville, about German boys who asked if they were allowed to smile. Your story shaped how I see the world." They drove to the Aldridge home, a ranch-style house in a quiet neighborhood. Inside, the dining table was set, and on it, roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans, fresh bread, apple pie, the same meal from 1945. Lucas stopped in the doorway, stared. Eleanor smiled. Nate insisted. "I called Elijah Townsend and got the exact recipe. He is retired now, lives in Atlanta. He wanted to be here, but his health would not permit the travel. He sent his love." They sat. The original 3 Germans, the Aldridge family, Daniel's wife and his son, a 10-year-old boy named Nathan, after his grandfather. Before they ate, Aldridge raised his glass. 25 years ago, 37 boys came to Camp Aliceville. They had been taught to expect death. Instead, they found mercy. Not because we were saints, but because we saw children where others saw enemies. He looked at Lucas. "You asked if you were allowed to smile. That question changed me, changed how I saw the world, changed how I raised my son." He turned to Daniel. "I told Daniel about you from the day he could understand. I said, somewhere in Germany is a boy your age who survived because someone chose kindness. Remember that. When you are angry, when you want revenge, when someone tells you to hate, remember that choosing mercy is always possible." Daniel nodded. "And I tell Nathan the same thing." Young Nathan looked at Lucas. "Did the rabbit really let you pet it?" Lucas smiled. "Every day. We brought it carrots and lettuce. It would sit in our laps while we worked in the garden." They ate. The food tasted exactly as Lucas remembered. Rich, savory, made with care and love. This time, no one cried. They had learned to receive kindness with joy instead of grief. After dinner, Lucas pulled out the photograph from 1945. 37 boys with hope, worn at the edges, carefully preserved for 25 years. Aldridge produced his own copy, also worn, framed and hanging on his wall. "I look at this every day," Aldridge said. "I remind myself, this mattered. What we did mattered. You boys survived. You built lives. You had children." "Because of you," Lucas said. "Because you chose mercy." "No, because you chose to heal. I just gave you permission." They sat in Aldridge's living room, talking until midnight, sharing stories, showing photographs, laughing, crying. Carl presented Aldridge with a gift, a painting, Hope the rabbit, sitting in an Alabama garden, sunlight streaming through the leaves. "I painted this for you, to say thank you." Aldridge held the painting. "It is perfect. This will hang in my home for the rest of my life. Everything I paint because you gave me permission to hope again." Jacob played his guitar, the same battered instrument from Camp Aliceville. He played Silent Night, the same song from Christmas 1945. They all sang, in German and English, mixing languages, mixing memories. Young Nathan fell asleep on the couch. Daniel carried him to bed. As the evening ended, Lucas stood with Aldridge on the back porch, Texas stars bright overhead. "I kept my promise to Georg," Lucas said. "I found his mother. In 1947, she had survived, living in West Berlin. I told her he was brave, that he thought of her at the end." "Did you tell her the truth?" "I told her the truth she needed to hear. That her son died believing he was doing something honorable." Aldridge nodded. "That was the right choice. Sometimes mercy means protecting people from truths that would only bring more pain." I teach now. History. I tell my students about the war, about propaganda, about how children can be used by evil systems, and I tell them about Camp Aliceville, What do you tell them? That even in the darkest times, there are people who choose mercy. That Captain Nathaniel Aldridge could have treated us like enemies, but he chose to see us as children, and that choice saved 37 lives. You would have survived anyway. Would we? Or would we have survived broken? Lucas turned to face him. You did not just keep us alive. You taught us how to be human again, how to trust, how to hope. They stood in comfortable silence. Are you happy? Aldridge asked. Truly happy? Lucas thought about Anna.
About Heinrich and Georg. About his students.
Yes, I smile every day. Not because I have forgotten what happened, but because you taught me I am allowed to. That smiling does not mean dishonoring the dead, it means honoring the living. He paused. You gave me permission to be human again, Captain, and I have spent 25 years trying to pass that gift forward, teaching my students, raising my sons, showing them that mercy is not weakness, that choosing kindness takes more courage than choosing hate. Aldridge put his hand on Lucas's shoulder. Then it worked. Everything we tried to do at Camp Aliceville, it worked. Not just for you, for everyone your life has touched since. Inside, through the window, they could see Karl and Jakob talking with Daniel. 3 men who had been broken boys, now whole. Thank you, Lucas said simply, for everything. You always mattered, Aldridge replied. That was never in question. We just had to help you see it. They returned inside.
The evening continued. More stories, more laughter, more tears of the good kind, and through it all, the photograph from 1945 sat on the coffee table. 37 boys with a rabbit named Hope. A reminder that even in the worst of times, mercy is possible, that healing can follow trauma, that the question, are we allowed to smile, deserves only one answer. Always yes. Epilogue. Lucas Dietrich Weber died peacefully in 2003, age 73, surrounded by Anna, Heinrich, Georg, and 4 grandchildren. Nathaniel Aldridge, 87 and widowed, but still strong, flew to Hamburg for the funeral. Daniel came with him. So did Elijah Townsend, 81. At the graveside, Karl placed his original drawing, the one from 1945, preserved for 58 years, beside Lucas in the casket. Go with hope, Karl whispered. Jacob played Silent Night one final time. Ernst, now a priest of 77, offered prayers in Latin and German. And the story continued, because Lucas had raised Heinrich and Georg to understand mercy. They taught their children, who taught theirs. Karl's paintings toured the world, museums, schools, memorials, each one a testament to a rabbit that had taught broken boys to hope again. Jacob's music therapy program expanded across Europe, helping survivors of every conflict, anywhere children were taught to be soldiers. Ernst's church opened a shelter for refugees, named it Hope House. In Fort Worth, Texas, Nathan Aldridge, grandson of Nathaniel, became a teacher. He taught his students about his grandfather, about German boys who asked if they were allowed to smile. The photograph from Camp Aliceville, 1945, still hung in the Aldridge home, passed down through generations. Dr. Samuel Rothstein had died in 1968. His children donated his papers to a Holocaust museum. Among them, a letter he had written about Camp Aliceville, about choosing compassion over revenge. Sergeant Augustus Pemberton lived until 1995. His 3 sons, Matthew, Luke, and John, all became teachers. They told their students about the German boys their father had helped raise, about hot chocolate at 0300 hours. The story rippled outward, across decades, across continents, across generations. Because one American captain had decided that children were children regardless of the uniform they wore. Because a Jewish doctor had decided that mercy mattered more than revenge. Because a black cook had decided to feed people first and ask questions later. Because a sergeant from Georgia had decided that boys who lost brothers could still be brothers to other boys. And because 37 German children had dared to ask, are we allowed to smile?
The answer echoed across 70 years, still echoing, still teaching, still offering hope to anyone who needs permission to heal. Yes, you are allowed to smile. You are encouraged to smile. You are somebody's child, and that still matters. Always.